I'll just give you a very general prompt. Why don't you talk a bit about why you started Yarlung Records, what your mission is, and what are some of the challenges that you face today in the field of bringing out high quality sound recordings for the targeted audiences that you're seeking to reach?
You also mentioned Yarlung's Grammy nominations. The first Grammy win is thanks to your lovely wife, Dale, because she was the one who shepherded our recording at the Broad Stage, which was the inaugural recording at the theater. And Antonio Lisi has done many concerts there, both in Dale's time and since. And his album, Antonio Lisi at the Broad, Music from Argentina, is the one that won the first Grammy. So, Dale, thank you for that. There have
And
been
just so Antonio Lisi, so you all know, is a great cellist, was the head of the string department at UCLA until just recently, and now he's retired. I don't know if you know that, but he's retired from UCLA, and instead he's on the road performing. So he's doing much more performing and spending much more time in Italy. But yeah, that was a great album, and it came out in vinyl, it came out in CD format, it came out in it was beautifully engineered and produced.
And I have the album. It's a great album.
Oh, Cliff, what a
Yes.
treat. Thank you.
Yes, I have.
One of the things that was particularly gratifying to me about this project, about this recording, and it speaks to our mission and why we started. So let me just back into your two first questions this way. Antonio has been, I mean, he's still very young, even though he's the grandfather, but he was a very successful concert performer as a young man. He grew up in the UK and in Switzerland. He performed a lot with his father, a very famous Argentine violinist. He basically lived with Yehudi Menuhin in London when he was there and studied with the entire family. Antonio's performing career took a little bit of a back seat when he started teaching so heavily, both in Montreal and then later at UCLA. And he performed, but not a lot. His talent, though, was irrepressible. And so the thing that gave me a real treat, a real pleasure, was to watch what happened after we did this recording, because Antonio launched, as a result of this recording and as a result of the support he got with the Grammy win, he launched a tour in North America, in South America, in Europe. He even performed at Teatro Colón in Argentina, where his father had made so many fine performances decades earlier. And this all happened thanks to the traction that the album generated. It gave him a calling card. It was a business card that had been reviewed internationally and in serious publications. The award, of course, helped. It gave him an additional focus. So he was able to create several tours, including a show with video and photography and live tango dancers that actually premiered at the Broad Stage a few years later. And it just gave his performing career an additional boost. We have since done 3 additional albums with him, which were all successful in their own way and very different. So why did we start? Yarlung began 17 or 18 years ago at the absolute low point of the recording industry. The industry, as you know, that long ago had basically collapsed. No one was buying any music. There was this great worry about how performers were going to reach audiences outside of live performances. And no one knew what was happening, really. So we decided to record a couple of young performers. And the first album that we recorded was a solo piano album with an Australian pianist who was studying at the Colburn School at the time, and created his debut album. That wound up earning him a solo recital the following season at Queen's Hall at the Edinburgh Festival. because one of our friends sent his album to the executive director of the Edinburgh Festival, who hired the pianist based on that performance and recording. One thing to mention is that because we don't edit at Yarlung, when people hear these performances, they realize that that's the way the musicians actually play. It's not surgically faked by me in post-production after the fact. So it was safe, in other words, to hire David to make his debut in Queen's Hall. And he gave a very successful recital there, and it began his career. And he's performed quite a bit in Europe and the Near East. He performed in Tel Aviv many times. And he is now a professor of music at a prestigious American university and touring a lot as well. So
Bob, can I just interject something? Because I have to say, I've been in lots of recording sessions. When I see I see microphones all over the place, microphones hanging, microphones on the floor, microphones, dozens of microphones, and then a mixing station and all that. I've only been to one of your recording sessions, but it was at Zipper, as I recall. And I just loved it because guess how many microphones Bob used at that session? 2, exactly 2, left and right. That gives you an idea of he's doing old school acoustic, like if any of you are audiophiles, the classical albums from the 50s, Mercury Living Presence orchestra recordings, they were just a left and right channel, right? And that's those, and they sound really good. So anyway, it's a different recording aesthetic, and it's one that the audiophile community has embraced a lot. So I'll turn it back to you, Bob. But I just had to interject that story because it's the only time in my life I've seen just a 2 microphone recording session on analog tape. By the way,
that was Orion Weiss's
analog tape going around like that.
Mixing with lots of microphones and a mixing board is often successful because it's so much easier to set up and capture to begin with. Things can be fixed in post-production when you have many tracks and many microphones to enable the synthesis of what we try to do with, say, 2 tracks originally. So that's a special art. There is a cost anytime you use a mixer and anytime you use that many microphones. The costs in general are noise from the mixer, from the analog or tube stages that amplify every single station. They all add up cumulatively. And secondly, you have multiple arenas where phase problems and microphone placement can become an issue if you're not an absolute genius and walk on water with a mixing board. So those are the 2 drawbacks. The benefit, of course, is that it's much faster to set up a recording, much easier to make the recording itself, and then figure out what you want to do with the balance afterward. Our approach has been painful in comparison. The Orion Weiss recording that I'm thinking about took 7 hours to set up those 2 microphones. Those were 2 U47s, if I remember correctly. And we would do a test and then check it, and do a test and check it. And these were, toward the end, fairly minimal changes. And we were changing acoustics in the hall with the curtains up in the ceiling to affect how much natural decay we wanted and so forth. So that, again, thank you, Don, for bringing this up. It is how we record, and it is our aesthetic. Many of the techniques that we're using are, in fact, very old-fashioned. The microphones that I think you're remembering seeing were made in 1948, Don.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We are using brand new analog tape decks, but the analog tape deck is an old method. And granted, we had analog tape decks since World War II. However, it is a brand new design by Sonorous. The other thing that we do, which at one point was cutting edge, is we're recording also in 256 FSDSD, using what was at the time brand new technology for merging in Switzerland. So we have a hybrid of old-fashioned ideas and the newest technology, including Sonorous holographic imaging, which we do now for all of our recordings in the analog domain. There are only 2 of these units in the world. What it enables us to do is to record rear tracks as well, and then use a little bit of that phase information in the holographic imaging processor to create a deeper, richer, more accurate soundstage that will play more accurately for two speakers in listeners' listening rooms. That's also brand new. So it is a hybrid set of technologies, very old and continually evolving today. The mission you asked about. As we learned with our Australian pianist, these recordings turned out to be very important in these musicians' careers. And we realized, aha, this is not just making a recording, releasing a CD or a vinyl LP or analog tape. It's actually important for the musicians' careers. So Brenda Barnes, who was then president of KUSC, our classical station in Southern California, summoned me to a lunch meeting. And she said, Bob, what are we going to do to help you? And I said, why? What do you mean? She said, we need what you're doing, Bob, because we are running out of things to play. We have no new repertoire at KUSC, and we have 24 hours of music a day. We can't redo all of the wonderful recordings from the 50s and 60s and 70s. We need something new. So, of course, things have improved dramatically since then. This was 18 years ago. But I thought about it, and we spoke again a few days later. And I said, I'll tell you what we'll do, Brenda. We'll start a board. We'll create a nonprofit to do this because we're never going to make any money or break even. So, and you'll be our first president. And she swallowed and she said, okay. So Brenda served as our first board president for about 5 or 6 years. And she did a great job. Our mission, therefore, was to record. Our mission really from the IRS's standpoint was twofold. One, record debut albums for international concert musicians at the beginning of their careers. And that meant when they were starting to perform in major concert halls where having a recording would be useful for them as they meet their audience. Secondly, it was to record new music, create commissions of music from living composers, and combine those carefully with the recordings that we wanted to make to support young musicians. So in some cases, we have recorded debut albums with young musicians who recorded all classical repertoire, nothing new. In some, there's been a hybrid, a young musician and some commissions. And in some cases, we've worked with artists at the top of their field. The Finnish violinist Pekka Kuusisto comes to mind, or Takács Quartet this last April. He is among the foremost classical violinists in the world right now, and Takács is, now that the Emersons have retired, the leading string quartet on the planet. They worked with us, but we recorded new music with them. So in the case of Takács, I think there were 5 new commissions that had never been heard before. And then in the case of Pekka Kuusisto, we commissioned 6 pieces for him for violin and piano, all of which came out well and which are coming out, thankfully, next spring on vinyl. The challenges today, well, there are many. Fortunately, the recording industry has recuperated a little bit. Streaming has done very well, such that our friends at Universal and so forth are actually making money again. This is great. This is important because when we started Yarlung Records, the major labels were collapsing right and left. Now it looks like they're not only making money, but Sony and Universal are actually thinking toward the future and smiling about it as opposed to being depressed. But the challenges remain that we have a huge number of very talented graduating musicians from the conservatories around the world, not only Peabody, Colburn, Juilliard, but in Europe, of course. And when these talented musicians graduate, or just before they graduate, they often have the feeling, okay, I want to be a soloist and perform with the world's great orchestras, or I want to be composing for Third Coast, or I want to be commissioned by the New York Philharmonic every couple of years to write a great orchestra piece. This is wonderful. The problem is that the spots for young soloists around the world are very few. The young Hilary Hahns are 100 to 1, so that there are extremely talented people graduating, as you know, from your own conservatories, and wonder what the next stages will be. This is one of the reasons why Don's class is so important, I think, because one of the things that he does is introduce us to the various aspects in the music business where we can make a contribution and enjoy our lives. Dale is a perfect example. She had a successful career as an opera singer, but morphed it into 2 other arenas that have no specific retirement date. She can be running a concert hall or producing plays when she's 80. It would be hard to listen to her high C at 80. So, Dale's very smart.
You don't know. Magda Olivero had a high C at 80.
The point is that there are many arenas in the music world where one can contribute and enjoy it. I was a singer. I studied for 20 years. If I'd had any talent, I would be successful. But to be honest with you today, I also studied the guitar, the classical guitar, when I was 5. If I had been talented, I might have had a career. No, sir. However, I don't miss it. What those years did, those decades with a classical instrument and with singing, taught me was a tone concept. And they also taught me a certain language that I can use with any instrumentalist or singer about how to approach a difficult passage, how to work on the music, how to coach through a dilemma in a string quartet that frankly is written in a way that's too hard for anybody to play. All of my time singing and working and coaching with actually someone who used to coach with Dale. You studied with Jack Metz, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So it's all a family here, you see. All of those years contributed to what I can bring to the table as a producer or recording engineer today. And frankly, I don't miss the fact that I was not a singer or a guitarist. I'm very happy playing a microphone.
A number of these students are instrumentalists, and they are hoping to have the kind of careers you just talked about. How can a label like yours be a stepping stone to advance their careers? And because you've got lots of case studies where you've really done that. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yarlung does not manage musicians. Actually, Aaron Agigian, who's our board president, does a little bit. But officially, we're not a management company. And it's not something I know about. But what I do and what our reviewers help with is that when we have a young musician who succeeds with a debut album that really makes sense musically, that is a coherent statement that takes the listener on a journey and that suggests to conductors or impresarios around the world that this person is a good person to hire, we definitely do let our friends know. And we have advisors who work with us officially and then unofficially to help us choose and select the musicians we're going to support, but they also know what the results are. So, for example, Sasha Cook, who is a successful mezzo-soprano today, was not beginning when she made her debut album with us. She'd already performed at the Met. However, this was her debut album, and that album helped her develop a concert career in the UK, in Europe, and she's toured many years now with the English Concert. Harry Bickett is one of our advisors, and we introduced them when Harry was conducting in Chicago. He was conducting the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and I sent Sasha over to have lunch with him. So things like this are small ways that we can help when musicians are ready to meet with conductors or different people who are programming a repertoire. In one case, Yuka Mabuchi and her trio went with us to the Performing Arts Showcase in New York in January. It was 2017 or 18. And she wound up with an international agent as a result of that trip. So in small ways, we can help nudge performers along. One of the things that I do a lot with musicians, which is also completely unofficial, is if they are great performers but have trouble with their stagecraft, They don't know how to walk on stage. They don't know how to engage the audience. They don't know how to make the audience feel comfortable. That's something that I've done a couple of times with some pretty dramatic effect, such that the person doesn't come out and look like a neophyte and then play like a god. You want the person walking on stage to be a god before he or she is visible to the audience. Small things like that we can do to help hone careers. But we are, as I mentioned, starting with musicians who are already at the absolute top of their ability and talent. So our job is enviably rather easy in comparison to the people at the conservatories and the coaches helping to build the skills that enable these performers to perform so well. Once we have an album, Petteri Ivonen, we did his debut album. He's a Finnish violinist. When he toured a few years later with the Lahti Symphony Orchestra in Japan, it was his first time in Japan, but it turned out that he had a number of fans in the audience. He performed in Hokkaido, he performed at the Tokyo Opera House and somewhere else. People brought his Yarlung recordings for him to sign to the concert. That made him feel great. But also our Japanese distributor had albums available in the lobby so that they could buy them and he could sign them and meet new people. That was fantastic. So this is a small way that we are acting as a catalyst between a musician and audience such that they make friends around the world where they perform, and then hopefully have relationships where the audience members write in, say, to the performing arts venue and say, hey, we heard Petteri Ivonen, oh, we heard Kate or Mika Sasaki. When will he or she come back? That's golden. That's important.
No, that's a great explanation. I think that one of the ways that recordings have changed, it used to be artists made recordings to make money, or they toured to sell records. Now I think it's somewhat reversed. And as Bob has explained, a good recording with a responsible label like Yarlung can be a calling card and a sort of an advanced resume for people to know what you're up to and what kind of level of artist you are. Okay, so now
one final comment, if I may. There are musicians today who are obviously making a fortune. We just think about Taylor Swift, for example. This is a person who has great talent, energy, and business acumen. I'm not sure if she's actually making $1 billion for it, but it's quite a chunk of change regardless. That's a different world. She will make money on her recordings, but like you said, her recordings are feeding the beast that funnels people into the arenas where she's selling very expensive tickets. In our case, if an album breaks even, it's wonderful. But if 35 of those several thousand copies get into the right hands, that can help the musician's career. And you are absolutely right. The purpose of the album is to help the concert career, not vice versa today. It's absolutely backwards.
What would you be looking for? What would catch your attention? It's a cold call or a cold email, whatever.
Yarlung is unusual in that we respond to everyone who writes to us. And if the musician is not someone we're interested in working with, I may know the right fit somewhere else. But since you're talking about cold calls or cold approaches, I want to tell you what I did this last week. Two of our board members have been very interested in Yarlung's branching into recording some folk music, folk singers. And in fact, over the past year and a half, I've been auditioning people and we'll get there. So I thought, I am a big fan of the Vanguard recordings that the company made with Joan Baez in her early career. Her live in concert recordings especially. So I thought, what the heck? I looked up Joan Baez, who is a hero of mine, on the internet, and I found her personal business manager or something, a contact on her website. And I wrote to this guy and I said, dear Mr. So-and-so, I'm hoping you can pass this message on to particularly interested in how those early Vanguard recordings were made. Is there a chance that in the spring I could come up and meet with her somewhere in the Carmel Valley area, which is where she lives, and ask her recollections of where the microphones were placed and how the hall was recorded. I don't know if she'll get the message. I just sent it. I don't know if this other guy will write back or not, but we're without shame, we in the music business. And why should we be ashamed anyway to reach out to an idol and ask for her help and guidance? She won't have ever heard of Yarlung Records. I did include the websites, which she can look at, and that might impress her from a small perspective, but it doesn't matter. I just wrote the darn letter, and I thought I could work on this for weeks and hone it and fuss over it and have an ulcer over it. But I could also just write her a short note and send it. That's what I did, because I didn't know yet what Dale would be coaching us to do today, but I had an instinct. So that's my answer. Do it. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be flawless. If I can just make a quick comment to your point about being interested in recording engineering as well as piano performance. There are a growing number of women who are excellent recording engineers. And I've been surprised that it's not been more, because women generally hear better than men do anyway, especially as we get older. So it makes perfect sense, but it's a growing field for women, and I applaud you on that. I also want to tell you that the keyboard is the perfect instrument to access any other instrument that you could be working with in the future. Notice Cliff's piano in the studio behind him. Dale is a quite fine pianist. She may be a great singer, but she's also a good pianist. And much more than singing, say, or string playing, the piano is the instrument that gives you the best vocabulary and access to other musicians' challenges that you may be recording in the future. So focusing on both is actually a really good package. I want to make an example of Josh Groban. Whatever you think of his talent as a singer or performer, I can tell you what I know about him anecdotally, which is that when he shows up to do a performance, or at least in his early years, he shows up rested, sober, prepared, rehearsed. He has a vocal coach there should he have a question. He has a psychologist in tow if someone grimaces at him and he feels bad. The guy is honed. What that means is he is reliable, so that when an impresario hires him, the impresario knows what he or she is getting. That's critical in our world. The era of the genius diva or divo is over, where talent alone will help everyone forgive the rest of your personal foibles. It is extremely important as people, and Dale refers to this earlier, to be organized, healthy, happy, and coordinated such that your presentation to the world and to people who will hire you is entirely professional.